Giving birth is a pretty regular thing that happens among employees of public schools. I mean, the fact that there is no paid parental leave for public school employees is just completely asinine.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
In the last omnibus bill, pregnant workers got some extra protection from the tyranny of their bosses in the form of the Pump Act and the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. You can go back and check out our coverage on that on our YouTube channel. Both Alabama senators actually voted for both of those pieces of legislation, which is fascinating to me.
Which also, I think, lets you know the mildness of these reforms and protections.
Right. But these protections for parents and pregnant workers, they might have you thinking about what other benefits and protections do pregnant folks have in Alabama? And Sarah Swetlick has the answer for that in AL.com in an article titled, "Alabama State Employees Do Not Get Paid Parental Leave, Unlike Other States." Which explains, like the title suggests, that working people in the state of Alabama, working people for the state of Alabama, like if you're a state government employee, you do not get paid parental leave, despite Alabama ostensibly being a pro-life, pro-family state. Which, really, again, this is just another one of those instances where it puts to the lie puts the lie to the idea that they care so much for children that what happened? Not sure what. I think my mic just come unplugged for a bit, but I think I got it back. It puts the lie to the idea that these people care for children, that they care for mothers, that they care for parents. Because they don't even do that. They don't even provide for their own employees to be able to take care of their children when they have children.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. It's one thing to say as a Republican, well, I'm not going to dictate what private businesses do with their employees. But if you are an elected official, you have direct influence on what happens with public sector employees, whether that be for the state of Alabama or for public education employers within the state of Alabama or local governments. You absolutely could make a difference there.
Yes.
And if you felt like it was important that babies be home with their mothers, that mothers be home with their babies, that
mothers be forced to carry a pregnancy to term, then you should feel like it's important to give them the opportunity to take care of this other human that you forced them to have.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is, it's the right thing to do for any number of reasons, but if you're going to constantly tell everyone that you're pro-family, that you believe in family values, well, here's something that is so clearly a pro-family move to have parental leave so that new mothers, new fathers can be home with a new child, whether they adopt or give birth to a child, whatever the situation may be. It is very clear, the research is like overwhelming how important that is for the development of the child, for the development of the family itself. So much so that you could argue it actually has an educational impact as well. And I think that's where a lot of times I get very upset about this issue, and I believe educators probably don't make enough noise about this when over 70% of public school teachers are female. Giving birth is a pretty regular thing that happens among employees of public schools. I mean, just statistically, and the fact that there is no paid maternity leave, no paid parental leave for public school employees is just completely asinine.
Right.
And these are people who work for public education. The goal was supposed to be educate the public, educate children, and we know that this is the right thing to do for children. This is how to set them on the right path of development, so that hopefully by the time you get them in pre-K or kindergarten, they're doing well, right? And they're ready to learn, they're ready to move forward, and so it has a ripple effect that goes beyond just the worker itself into the family, into the school, and in the broader community. But it's absolutely the right thing to do for working class people to have paid parental leave. It's a shame that the state of Alabama does not do that for its employees, whether they work for the state or work in schools. And I would love to see more organizing among public school employees. I believe that that's one of the core issues that public school employees need to be organizing around. I've always felt that way, and I've talked about it for years, that we didn't talk about it enough. When over 70% of your employees potentially are dealing with this in a very direct manner. I know my wife, for example, it took her a couple school years to recuperate her sick leave. My daughter was 2 or 3, I think, by the time my wife actually had sick leave again. And that's a very common experience. I mean, again, you're thinking just statistically, most of the teachers who are going to be giving birth are going to be earlier in their career. They may or may not even have tenure yet. They may or may not be vested in the retirement system yet, but they certainly don't have a ton of sick leave built up. Right. So it's just a shame. And I believe that all workers deserve some form of paid parental leave.
Absolutely, and just to add a bit more context before we wrap up this segment, I will say, just so that it doesn't seem like we're beating up on Alabama too much. Although we are, we're an Alabama show, right? So what happens in Alabama matters particularly to us. But the majority of states, and this did surprise me, that the majority of states do not have paid parental leave for their state employees.
Right.
Which is surprising. You would think that would not be the case, but it is. That is the case. The majority of state employees, at least according to Sarah Swetlick, do not have paid parental leave for their workers. But there are some interesting standouts, and those are, in particular, Georgia and South Carolina, who do guarantee paid parental leave for their state employees. So,
That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Right, and that it's states right here next to us that are doing this. It's not just, New York or California. But one thing I would say, maybe a wrinkle to that statistic, that most states do not have paid parental leave for state workers, is that in many of those states, they have strong unions, collective bargaining agreements that include parental leave provisions within the contract. I would assume. I can't say to what extent that makes up those states, but I would assume that in at least some of these states, there are union contracts that are addressing some of those leave provisions without it being addressed in state law. Yeah,
kind of like how. So that is definitely an interesting and relevant wrinkle to consider. It's not it's not like Adam has or I have gone in and done this, but in a similar way that whenever the minimum wage conversation comes up and conservatives point to like Denmark or Sweden and say these places don't have minimum wages, and it's like, yeah, but the minimum wage isn't in the federal law, but every single worker in these countries is represented by a union, and the effective minimum wage is in fact $22 an hour. As a matter of fact, you're not going to work in that country for less than $22 an hour. And so, that's something to consider.
Right. Yeah. There's different ways to accomplish the same means. Right. Like the prevailing wage is a form of minimum wage enforcement in a way. Right. Yep. So I think that, it'd be interesting to find out, if we dug into those states that don't have paid parental leave provisions, how many of them have union contracts that address those, and then how many don't, such as Alabama, where the public school employees or the state employees are just totally left out, high and dry.
Yeah. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m., and we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.